Good day to you. I want to share with you this particular item that I'm calling just Dr. Joseph Murphy, and then also Neville Goddard, and life changing. And I want to begin with an item that I was reading in my devotional time, and it actually comes out of the writings of an individual named Howard Thurman. If you're not familiar with Dr. Howard Thurman, he was a major preacher. I believe one of the individuals who was inspirational in the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and he has written a number of books. The one that I'm looking at is entitled Disciplines of the Spirit. Major thinker, deep thinking that he takes us very deep into a process of being a person of spirit, just a person of spirit. And the other day, as part of my devotional reading, I have been reading him as well as Emerson and others, so that I make sure that I am constantly and continuously feeding my own spirit. As I look at, how spirit is leading me and what spirit is saying to me, and giving much thought to this growth that is taking place as God is leading in my life, and comparing that with how God has moved in the lives of others. And so I've been looking at this book. I've had it for a number of years. I've got my notes. I believe that the margin in books, the margins are made for me to write in. And so one of the chapters in this book, the one that I am referencing now, is entitled Prayer. And he has a section in this where he is having a conversation about the Father's agenda. The Father's agenda. It's a major concern that he has in regard to his conversations and things like that, where he talks about this aspect of God's agenda in the world and how it is that he comes to know and understand and works along with God's agenda. How do you know that? How do you know that something is taking place, or that God is involved with the world, with the universe in this day and time? And he has a few words to say about that. And then in this particular section that I'm reading, which is called Prayer, he begins that the master was always concerned about his Father's agenda. He is talking about, when he says the master, he's talking about Jesus the Christ. He says, in reflecting on the discipline of prayer, I ask myself how I may find a clue to God's purposes in the world. How may I sense him at work? And then he says, already I'm aware of him in the hunger of my heart. So he says, I'm aware of God's work in the hunger of my heart. So he says that's a first indication of God's work in the world, what God is doing in the world. I'm aware of him in the hunger of my heart. In the depths of my own spirit, I may be aware of his presence, share his mind, and establish true communication, because my will come to rest in his will. And so he makes that clear, that one of the ways to understand how God is working in the entire universe, in the world, is to find God first in one's own heart. God is at work in one's own life, in the deeper inner recesses of one's own life. It says the work of God in the world is another important clue to his agenda. So he begins to look around, first within his own heart, and then secondly, he looks out at the world and says he begins to consider the clues that he finds there. And the next thing he does is that he goes and finds within the scriptural readings, within the Bible, those clues that are found within the Bible. And he uses in particular Psalms 19 and then also Psalms 8. And in Psalms 19, the text says, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament sheweth his handiwork. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night sheweth knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Their line is gone out into all the world, and their words to the ends of the earth. And so what he's basically talking about there, of course, is that he speaks about the aspect of that when he looks at the universe, when he looks at the stars, the sun, the moon, he looks at all of these things and he sees that there is a divine order that is in place in the universe, that the sun never rises in the west. It always rises in the east and it sets in the west. And he talks about that the other day. I was looking at this item that I have on my iPhone. It is called Skywise, I think it is, Starwise. It's an app that gives information in regard to the astronomy, and you're able to study the stars and things of that nature. And it's talking about what is taking place in the month of January. And actually, you can look at it and see the entire 2020, the year 2020. And it talks about how the stars are posted in the sky and what you can look for in regard to this particular month and, again, the entire year. And one of the things it makes clear is that there's order in the universe. It talked about the star Polaris and how it is always positioned over the North Pole. That piece is important to know. You remember that in regard to individuals as they were, so to speak, escaping, if you one of the individuals that saw the movie called Harriet, that there was follow the North Star. And then there's another song that called Follow the Drinking Gourd. That had to do with the Big Dipper and all of those types of things. Those stars are in the same position at certain periods of time. You can see them. And so this is what the Howard Thurman is talking about in regard to this particular item as well, that there are laws that are in place. And the text, as is talking here, is talking about the aspect that in nature, one sees God at work. One pays attention to this, and that's vital. Remember, one's own heart is in tune with the divine, and as a result of that, you're able to look out at nature and see again that the same God that's working inside of one's own life, inside of one's own heart, that same God is at work in nature. How may I know God's purposes in the world? And so there's this alignment, and he's calling this aspect of prayer, And then in Psalm 8, he says, when I consider the heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars which thou hast ordained, he asks the question, what is the human that thou art mindful of him, and the son of man that thou visitest him? For thou hast made him a little lower than the angels, and hast crowned him with glory and with honor. Thou hast made him to have dominion over the works of thy hand. I find that statement to be so powerful, because when I look at that particular statement, it tells of what we're talking about, whether we're talking about the law of attraction, whether we're talking about cause and effect, whatever it may be, whether you're talking about the aspect of changing your own life or an individual changing their own life. Because it says that God has made a human in such a way that that person is to have dominion over the works of God's hand. That person, I find that same statement actually in the book of Galatians chapter 4, verses 1 through 4. You may find me referencing that particular statement over and over and over again. Because in that chapter, there's a statement about an individual who is in charge of an estate. But he's a child or she's a child, and therefore does not understand how to run the estate. And the estate could be something. It could be anything. It could be 100,000 acres of land, but a child doesn't know how to run that. It could be a business. It could be a family. It could be a home. It could be anything. It could be a country, but the child does not know how to run it. And so the child must grow up And the text says under tutors. It could be the aspect of under laws. Most people look at it like that, and many people look at it from the standpoint of the Ten Commandments. I don't necessarily look at it in regard to that, because I look at something when it comes to the flying of airplanes, when individuals before could not fly airplanes. But when you move to the aspect of thermodynamics and all of those kinds of things, when man gained control of those laws, when he understood those laws and knew how to make steel float, he was able to do things with steel that he had not previously understood how to do. That's having dominion over laws. And that's what God intended for man, because steel does not control God. Steel does not control the angels. And so God intended for man and women to have that same level of dominion. That's what I see written here. When God is speaking, when God is talking about dominion. And so it calls for, according to the text, the laws, that which has dominion over, or the laws are meant to train an individual, to discipline an individual until they understand how to be master over the estate. That's the purpose of that. That's also what we're talking about when we talk about the inner journey of self-awareness to become your authentic self. It's a discipline. It's a training. It's a process by which you grow as you move toward your goals. You grow as you achieve your highest dreams. You grow. It's called, in coaching, it's called developmental coaching. It's more than just performance coaching. It's more than just simply getting to the point where you achieve your goal, so to speak. It's more than that. Because if you achieve your goal and you don't grow, that's what we call lateral growth. Developmental coaching is dealing with vertical growth. And as I said to other individuals, said in times past, that there are individuals that talk about this so much beyond what I may talk about it. There are individuals that you can read, that you can study. They probably have texts and everything else, videos and everything else, trainings. There's a fellow called Robert Keegan, Kegan, and Lisa Lahey, I believe. Lisa, Lisa, and then Lahey. They are individuals who've written tremendous books in regard to this as they talk about it. All I'm doing is talking about it from really a spiritual perspective, mythological perspective, but it's basically the same thing. They are organizational development experts. I'm industrial organizational psychology, same kind of area, working with individuals, also working with companies, where we see systems. And the human is a system as well as part of a system. And so there's a way that those things work together so that an individual understands how that actually takes place. And so this is the same thing, again, when we look at someone like Dr. Howard Thurman, when he's looking at this. But there was another item that he did inside of this particular item on prayer, which was so powerful as he talked about it, as he talked about this whole thing of how a person might pray, how they would go through a process of praying. Because many times people are looking at prayer and they're looking at it from the standpoint of method. How might I pray? How might I pray? What is prayer? And he goes through a process whereby he is talking about this thing which he calls, or which many call this aspect of entering into the silence. Entering into the silence. And this is a great item that he has in his book. And I looked at it and I thought it was worth sharing with you. Because he is talking about this aspect of entering into the silence. And let me, if you would like the book again, it's something that can be purchased. It's not a book that I wrote or anything like that. It says, he speaks about community, this whole thing in regard to that community, which is again a very, very important part of this particular thing. Let me mention this particular type of silence that he mentions. He says, silence is of many kinds. There is a silence which is a prelude to prayer, the moment of hush and ingathering. There's a silence that tends to quiet the soundless words that fall from the tongue and to calm the noises of the mind and spirit. Every person who is concerned about the discipline of prayer must find the ministry of silence in accordance with his or her particular needs. Certain mechanical devices are helpful. So he says certain mechanical devices are helpful. And he may be talking there about things such as music. He also mentions we must seek a physical place of withdrawal, a place of retreat if possible. It may be achieved merely by closing the door as a signal that one wishes to be alone. It may be by remaining in bed for a spell after everyone else is up and about. It may be by taking a walk or by extending a walk beyond the initial requirement or demand. It may be by withdrawing one's participation in conversation, even though one has to remain in the midst of company. And so here he is talking about this aspect of coming into what is called being silent. And he's not just talking about the silence that comes from not talking, but he's also talking about the silence really that comes from not participating in the conversations or in the noise even that goes on in one's own mind. It's the withdrawal from all the noise. And he says it can start by this whole aspect of coming to the place where you may use mechanical devices. That could be even it's the noise that's going on, and you may use sound, and you may use a place where you get to. It may be the closing of a door. It may be exiting a conversation that's going on, walking ahead or walking behind others, all of these kinds of things, so that you have a moment of silence. And then he says, once the physical silencing has been achieved, then the real work must begin. The calming of the mind as an effort to exclude distraction is a complex necessity. The soundless voices take the form of thoughts that distract. One of the most helpful things to do is to read or recall some stilling passage or thing, words that place before the mind a picture or a feeling tone that quiets or subdues and settles. And he says the Psalms are very helpful here. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Or something such as, Thou hast been our dwelling place in all generations. Or, Lord, Thou hast searched me and known me. And he says there are many such passages. And those are the ones he quotes from the biblical record, but there are those from the Quran, there are those from the Bhagavad Gita, there are those from other texts, the Tao Te Ching, there are those from other texts. And you use these to steal the mind. You can also use other devotional material and poems and psalms and songs, all of these, so that you can get the mind silent or get it to vibrate at the string of one thing and get it to focus on God. And this is where I mentioned the individual, Joseph Murphy and Neville Goddard. Neville Goddard talks about imagination. He is a person who talks about entering into a picture, focusing on a picture, and then actually using your imagination to step into that picture, and you become a part of that picture. It's like becoming part of a movie. Have you ever been watching a movie, and at some point in time, you may be sitting there watching a movie or a television program, and you're all caught up in it. I've found myself lately in various situations where I'm watching something on television, and I'm touched by it in such a way that I've got tears that are going down my eyes, going down my face, coming out of my eyes, because what is taking place there, I see some kind of deliverance that is taking place, some kind of healing that's taking place. I am just thrilled about what's happening. I've seen commercials. I tell people, and I think I've mentioned on this show, I remember when Danny Thomas and Marlo Thomas actually started this commercial for, I believe it is St. Jude. I see the Shriners commercial for their facilities as well. I see individuals. I see them. I don't just move past them when I see them on the street and things like that. I see individuals. I've stopped. I've been walking with my wife down the streets of Baltimore and seeing people pushing carts. We've brought people home from the streets of Baltimore, actually. Been to Africa and seen children who needed books and all of these kinds of things, try to help people. I see people. And I don't only see them when I see them physically. I see them when I close my eyes. Mother Teresa, who's Saint Teresa now, says every day, I see the Christ in his distressing disguises. Every day. You remember the Christ said, inasmuch as you have helped the least of these, my brethren, you have done it unto me. And so the idea is that you still the mind. You still the mind. S-T-I-L-L. You still the mind. And it could be a picture, it could be a song, it could be some kind of way that you still it in such a way, whatever the picture may be, whatever works for you, so that you are in the presence and indeed become the presence. Sense the presence. You in God, God in you. You are there for that moment. Neville Goddard talks about the use of the imagination and the power of that. Joseph Murphy talks about it in a different way, though the same thing. And what they're really all saying from the standpoint is, do whatever it is that is effective for you. There are many roads that lead to the same place, but do something that is effective for you. There are affirmations that a person can use. There's music that a person can use. Some person may get in the lotus position as far as meditation. Another person may sit in the chair. Another person may go for a walk. Whatever works for the individual. And so when Dr. Joseph Murphy talks, he speaks of it from the standpoint of the power of the subconscious mind. And he is talking about that as well. The use of the imagination. He talks about the use of text. He has stories because he lived at a time, and then he would talk and teach people, and then he would find stories even inside of newspapers and magazines and all of those things, and he would talk about those in his books. I was reading one of his books that is called The Cosmic Energizer, which is just another name for the Holy Spirit, which is just another name for what is called the Force inside the movie Star Wars. Because there's only one God. That text tells you that hero Israel, the Lord is one. He's just called by so many names. And people pick it up. Well, he calls it the cosmic energizer, which is the energy that is in all the cosmos. There's only one cosmos. There's only one universe. And so he calls it the cosmic energizer. God is omniactive. He is the one energy in the entire universe. And so he calls it the cosmic energizer. And so he has story after story after story about individuals that he is familiar with. And he tells the stories from the standpoint of those who utilize the subconscious mind, which is an avenue by which, when you get into this avenue of being in touch in the stillness with God, the Spirit of God moves through you in such a way that your awareness knows that something special is taking place. People call that being in the flow. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. And he talks of what one would consider to be the miracles that take place in the midst of that, how healings take place. Because Spirit knows how to heal, how to deliver, and how to set free when Spirit is allowed to do it. Spirit knows how to heal the body, how to make it well, how to make it work right, how to not only heal the body, but God can work in any system, in a business system. He's got stories about that. How situations, whether they are sales situations, whether they are factory situations with machines and all that, God knows how to do all of that. And he shows these things in his book, and he talks about that. And sometimes people rather hear it in that way because it seems, almost preposterous when you hear someone say that I went inside of somebody's room and that person, I received a call from a person's daughter who said, I want you to go visit my mother. My mother is dying and I want you to go and visit. You don't know her, but I know her. She's my mama and she's dying. And we expect that she's going to be dead in like a few hours, but if you could just get down and see her. And you walk into an individual's room, and then that individual, she is supposed to be dying. She's got tubes everywhere. But you walk into a room, and then you sit there, or you talk to her, and you're trying to make sure that she knows God, that she knows God. And you talk to that person, and then after a while, you just sit down, and when you wake up, you just pray. And a few hours later, that person goes home. Lives for another 3 months, about 90 days. During that 90 days, she lives a whole lifetime. Gets her entire family. Tells them everything, things that they had not known. Lets them know all kinds of things. Then after that 3 months, then that person, after they got their situation straightened out, then that person passes away. And they tell about this angelic visit that came. And let them know that God had not forsaken them, which they had thought for the previous nearly 30 to 40 years. That's real. Dr. Murphy talks about similar things. That's why we're talking about this aspect of prayer. Because there are people that think, based on what has happened, that God in some kind of way has forsaken them. And God is nearer to you than breathing. Closer to you than your hands and your feet. Well, how close is that? God is never so far away from you as to be near. Because God is within you. He has promised and he has kept that promise. Or you can call God he, she, it, whatever. But God has promised that he will never forsake you. Before you were ever born, he made that promise. And that means that God is inside of you. Omnipresence means that wherever you are, God is. Never breaks that promise. And what we are talking about is simply being able to know that, to live with that, to know it at a deeper and richer level, and to be able to consciously bring that forth in your life day after day after day and live in the power of that. Send us an email, info@iwillrestore.com, info@iwillrestore.com, or you can do it at info@drdlwaters Senior. info at DRDL Waters, WATERS, then SR.com, which stands for Dr. D.L. Waters Sr.com. Send us an email, either one of those addresses, and we'll send you some information because we want 2020 to be your year of plenty. We want this to be the best year ever for your life. Blessings for you. Take care.